And screen sharing now. Everyone, someone let me know you can see my screen just to confirm you're seeing a slide that is a mosaic of DC. It says DC Redistricting Online.
Yes.
Yes.
See it.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
thank you. So to begin, this is the tutorial for our online redistricting software that we're going to be using now for ANC and SMD redistricting. We just did it for wards over the last few months, and I think it was pretty successful. A lot of people were using it to submit their version of the wards to the redistricting subcommittee. This one's more of a closed door exercise where you task force members are going to be doing the work, but the application is still up there for the general public to use this. So it's possible that other people might be doing the same kind of work you are and just, you know, blogging about it or going to public meetings with their versions of these plans, just to let you know that it is still open to the public to use as they'd like to. My name is Dennis Wardenberg. I'm a GIS specialist at the Office of Planning. GIS is Geographic Information Systems, which is software for making maps and doing spatial analysis work, essentially connecting statistical data to location is what GIS does. And the application I'm going to teach you tonight is a GIS. It's a specialized GIS for redistricting, for attaching statistical population data, specifically counts of people, to where they are, and then being able to create polygonal boundaries and finding out how many people are inside of those boundaries. And so what we're doing is redrawing our political boundaries. We do it every 10 years after each census results are released. The reason we do it is to make sure that we have equal representation for whatever political boundaries it is we're redistricting. As populations change and usually grow, and they don't grow homogenously, you know, some areas grow faster than others, it's necessary to rebalance the political boundaries so that in the case of wards, that each ward council member is representing a roughly equal number of people, and in the case of SMDs and ANCs, that the single member districts are each representing a roughly equal portion of people. The ANCs themselves can have different numbers of commissioners, but the commissioners themselves should each be representing a roughly similar number of people. And it's written into DC code that the single member districts are supposed to represent about 2,000 people each. Generally, redistricting, we're allowed a 5% variance from that goal. 5% of 2,000 is 100, so we're trying to get our SMDs to be within 1,900 to 2,100 people. It's not a hard and fast rule that, you know, if you're at 1875, that's too small. But I do believe the council is looking for justification for any SMD that is not within that tolerance, and they will give a yay or nay about it. I'll admit I'm a little fuzzy on that political end of the process, but technically here in the software, our goal is to come up with numbers that are between 1,900 and 2,100. So how this software works is it uses the census data to tell you how many people are in an area, because the census doesn't just tell us how many people are in the district or in any given state. They break the country into smaller pieces and then report back the number of people that live in each of those pieces. And they create their own geography hierarchy for that reporting. And I'm going to go over that with you guys here. Their largest denomination, the largest pieces they break the country into are called census tracts. And here you can see the census tracts that they've divided DC into. You'll notice they're not all the same size. That's because the goal isn't that they're all the same size in area, but that they're all roughly the same size in population. They have a rough goal of about 4,000 people per census tract. So the more densely populated areas will have a smaller area, and the larger or the lower denser populated areas will have a larger area because they have to reach out to a broader area to reach that goal of about 4,000 people. They further divide their census tracts into smaller pieces called block groups. And here you can see with the light blue lines, the way they divide DC's census tracts into census block groups. And then they further divide the block groups into census blocks. Here you can see all of the census blocks. The general concept is that a census block represents a city block. And in the city core where we have nice north, south, east, west streets, that works out. but in more suburban areas of the country and in the least or lower populated areas of DC, the shapes of them, they can be a little funnier, but still the concept is a city block equals a census block. And these are the pieces that we're going to work with for SMD redistricting, because we want to work with the most fine-grained pieces we can, since we're working with such small entities. The SMDs are, with only 2,000 people, they don't need to be very large to reach that goal. So we need to work with the smallest census pieces we can, which is the blocks. And the way the software works is each census block has the data for how many people live there from the census. And we are going to use them kind of like Legos, is how I think of it, where we're going to assemble census blocks together into SMDs, and the software will tell us how many people there are in those assembled census blocks. So when we say these 4 census blocks make them this SMD, it automatically tabulates the population of those 4 blocks and adds it up and assigns it to the SMD that we're creating, so that we can on the fly see the populations of the areas. So with that, I'm going to jump to the application and just kind of show you some basic layout of it. You don't have to go logging in yourself yet. I'm just going to start with an overview of what it looks like. It's entirely internet-based, so whatever web browser you've got, you can go to the address for the application and just go to the login page, which is the default page you get, and hit the login button, and then log in with your username. And when you do that, the application will open, and this is the default opening screen where it'll ask you to choose a template plan. Template plans are essentially starting points that I've created for getting the ball rolling with a lot of the, kind of background work already done for you before you can start making the lines. There are 2 plans for each ward, and unfortunately they're not sorted by default, but if you click on the plan name heading, it will sort them alphabetically. So you'll see for each ward, there's one called ward number ANC SMD, and then ward number blank ANC SMD. The one without the word blank is as my best approximation of what the current 2013 ANCs and SMDs are, with their 2020 census blocks assigned to them already. So if you want to work from the starting point of where are we already, and I'd like to modify that, you can use that template. The blank one is the whole ward with no assignments made at all yet. So you have a blank slate, and you'll have to build every SMD from scratch yourself, which would be is more work, but it's the better choice if you don't want to be bound by what already exists today and you'd like to start with a blank slate. So whichever one works better for you, or try both of them and give them both a try before you know. For this tutorial, I'm going to work in Ward 7, and I'm going to work with the one where they are already pre-populated to an approximation of the 2013 ones. So I'm just going to open that template just to kind of show you what the application looks like. My screen there. The basic layout is there's a tool ribbon at the top with all the tools for working with the application, a big map in the center showing you the actual SMD boundaries you're working on, and a tabular view that's kind of like a spreadsheet at the bottom of the page that shows you the population data about the various SMDs. I'm going to close this window so I get more screen for my application. One of the first things I do is I make this table view at the bottom a vertical window rather than a horizontal window. By default, it's attached to the bottom of the screen in a very horizontal view, which is good if you want to look at a lot of population statistics, but it's not good if you need to look at a lot of SMDs, which we do. We're going to have at least a good 40, I think, for pretty much every ward. So the thing you can do is, in this, I'm going to go over this in the tutorial better, but I'm just going to do it right now to make my view better, is you can detach it and put it in its own window and reshape it vertically. And I know I just did that very quickly. Don't worry, I'm going to show you in much more detail how to do that. I just want to, for me, while I'm showing you the layout. So again, there's a big map, there's a table, and then there's all of the tools. The tools are in what's called a ribbon style, which is kind of how Microsoft Office works these days, where instead of having all the buttons at once, They're grouped under tabs, kind of functionally or thematically together. And then you switch to the different tabs to see the tools that are under those tabs. And generally the workflow is from left to right, where when you're starting out, you're working with the tools in the left tabs, and as you're progressing, you work your way through the tabs to the right. And the leftmost tab is the basic file kind of stuff that almost all computer software has: how to open files, how to save files, how to print some files, how to export some files. And I'm going to go over that stuff with you right now, which is pretty basic and similar to most software with just a couple small differences. We'll start a new plan from scratch, which you could do. I think it's better to just work from one of the two template options I gave you, but you don't have to. You can hit the new button and start everything from scratch. Open is how you open up an existing plan that's already been saved, either getting back to the templates if you want to do that, or a plan you've worked on previously and you'd like to get back to, or a plan that someone else has shared with you that they've set up. You can get to them all through the open dialog. Save and save as, just as you would expect, saving the current plan in its current state. Save as saves the current plan in its current state, but under a new name, so as not to overwrite whatever plan it was you were working from. And then open local and save local are the things that are slightly different about this software. By default, all the saving and opening, the files are cloud stored. They're stored with the application. So you can log in on any computer anywhere. And if you log in with your credentials, you'll be able to get at your files or files that have been shared with you because they're not stored locally. Some people don't want to rely on that cloud-based security. And I think, like a lot of when state governments are doing this, they don't trust putting them in the cloud. They want to save them locally. So save local allows you to instead save your plan to your own computer or to your own thumb drive or anything installed into the computer, and saving it to their device rather than stored in the cloud. And then open local is the flip side of that, of how you would open a plan that had been saved locally. You'd need to be on that same computer or have that same flash drive with you, and then you'd hit open local and navigate to its location. There is a downside to this in that this software allows you to share plans with other people that you want to. So if your task force is sharing these plans among its members, and any member would like to get at it at any time, the saving local option isn't a good idea because no one else can get at it because you have it saved locally to your own device. So in order to share, you need to use the basic saving tools. But if sharing is not important and you're very worried about security, you can use this save and open local option instead as well.
Dennis, this is Joy.
Yes.
Can I interrupt one bit?
Go ahead.
Gottlieb is trying to get in. He should be able to get right in. I'm not sure if anyone else is waiting. Are you seeing something on your screen to let anyone in? I'm not sure why that is happening.
I mean, I don't have any notifications, but I don't have the meeting locked to being in the lobby. It should be set up that just hitting the invite brings you in.
Yeah, that's what I told him, but I'm not sure why he's not getting in. He's saying he's getting a message that says, I'm starting at his screen that says, when the merging starts, we let people know you're waiting. So I'm not sure. Anyhow, thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry. He might does he have an invite to last week's meeting? Maybe he's looking at the wrong invite.
Okay.
He has already
All right.
He's in the guest list here, Gottlieb Simon. I mean, he's showing up in the chat.
Okay, well then he's here.
He probably got in. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, so I believe, I'll show you the print buttons I'm going to go over when we talk about sharing, because essentially this is a way to make a PDF map of your plan, which is a great way to share it. All the different ways you can share a PDF file. So I'm going to cover these tools when we go over sharing later on and kind of not bother with them just yet. An export is how you can export a GIS file of the boundaries you create so that you can work with them in other GIS software or provide them to other people who might want to do so. There's a few different formats available, but shapefile is generally the one that almost anyone with any software is going to be able to use. It's kind of universally acknowledged. So if you did want to export, shapefile is probably the best choice. And with that, I'm not going to go into any more stuff until you're all here with me. So we're going to do the first exercise, which is really just open the application and log in. I want you to go to the URL for the app with your web browser. There it is on my screen here. It's a little cumbersome if you don't have it already bookmarked. Make sure you open a new browser tab if you're looking at the meeting in your browser so you don't leave the meeting. And log in, and I want you to open the Ward 7 ANC SMD template like I did. And I want you to immediately save your own copy of that template using the Save As button, because the templates themselves are locked and you won't be able to do a lot of things that I'm going to have you do. When you make your own copy of it, make sure you give it a name that's clear that this is just the plan you did for training, especially if you're part of the Ward 7 task force. I don't want you to confuse this one with the real work you'll be doing. So, call it training plan or just for learning or something like that.
I'm not familiar with how to use Microsoft Office, so I'm not sure how to open another browser. I'll try.
So are you looking at the meeting through a browser? You're using like your Chrome or Firefox or what's the Microsoft one, Edge?
I'm in Microsoft Teams. I just clicked on the.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, if you're in Teams, that's good. But use your web browser. So whatever browser you prefer, it should work in all of them. And then open up the application there using this web address.
And we're saving it as Save As or Save, where do you want us to save it?
So do a Save As, and you'll be asked to give it a new name. Essentially, you're making your own copy of this template that you'll be able to make changes to and save changes to. And it's saved in the cloud. You don't have to pick a place for it to go. You just have to pick a name for it.
I don't know if you're going to get to this, but it looks like when you save it in the cloud, anyone can access it.
Yep.
Is that right?
That's not the case. No, we'll cover sharing later, but until you share it with someone else, it's your own plan and no one else can see it. You'll then have the choice later on to share it with specific groups of people, or there's also an option to just share with everyone. And if you do that option, then anyone with a login can see it. Some people do that. They like to show what they've been doing and have other people comment on it. Some of that was going on with the word plans.
Okay, so we should save as and then name it ourselves.
Yes, and give it a name that makes you clear that this is the one you were just using how to learn with. It's not real work.
And how do you find it? Do you go to open local?
Yep, I will show you that once we're back in. But yeah, it'll be in the open dialog to get back to it later on. Yeah, when you hit Save As, it won't look like anything's changed because you're just default still looking at that same map, but now you're working with your own copy. So has everyone got that done? Does anyone else need any help?
No, not yet.
I'm going to switch back to the application, and everyone should have a screen that looks mostly like mine, except you haven't learned about this table view yet, which I will get to. So I'm going to go over the open button next because it's kind of a lot. It shows a lot of stuff all at once, and I should probably talk about all the different parts there. When you first log into the application, as you saw, it makes you open up on the templates, and that's true even after you've saved your own plans. Unfortunately, you always have to start by picking one of those templates. But probably once you've gotten started, you don't want to start from scratch again the next time. So the first thing you're going to want to do is ignore that template that just got forced on you and go to the open dialog by hitting that open button and finding a plan you've saved previously. So when you hit the open button, you get this very wide window that has essentially three things to it. There's a folder view on the left and a list of plans in the middle, and then there's a preview window on the right, which currently is blank on my screen. The folder view there's three folders. The topmost one is recent, and that's just kind of a shortcut list of the things you've opened most recently. Could be templates, could be your own plans, could be plans that someone has shared. The middle one is my plans, which is literally a list of every plan you personally have saved before. And as you can see, I make a lot of copies of templates. And then the final folder is a folder called shared plans. And this is where you can get at plans that aren't your own plans, but that other people have shared either with you or with everyone in general. And we'll go over that a little more when we do sharing, but essentially the view is a list of groups that you're a member of, and then there's always a group called everyone, which is the folder for plans that are shared with everyone. So when you look at the everyone folder, you'll see board plans that have been shared with everyone. So for instance, if I look in there and I click on a plan in the middle, just a single click and highlight it, the panel on the right will then give me a preview of what that plan looks like and then some information about it, when it was made, when it was submitted to council, if it was a ward plan and they were submitted, that kind of stuff. And in the middle has information about who made the plan, a description about it if they wrote one, and then when they made it and last saved it. And this will be true of your own plans as well. As you just noticed, when you were asked to save a plan, you were asked to put a name in, and then you could also put in a description. And that's where that information will go into these fields here when you look at your open plan dialog. So I'm not going to open one of these. I want to stay with the template, but I also want to save my own copy of the template so that I can make changes to it. And now I should be in the same place as all of you. I've opened this Word 7 template and I've saved my own copy of it. So I don't think there's anything else to go over in the file tab just yet. Like I said, I'll come back to the printing when we do sharing. So the next tab over is kind of an exception to the tabs. The Learn tab doesn't actually have any tools on it. It's just kind of a bulletin board kind of place that gives you an overview of how the application works and has some links for where to get some help about it. So it's kind of like a, I don't know, almost like a help page, but not a very good one, to be honest. I feel like a better resource is going to be this class and then also the recording of this class that you can refer back to if you want further help. But this tab is available if you find something useful in there. I'm going to just skip past it though and move on to the next one, which is the View tab. And the View tab has mostly things about how to change what the map looks like, how to change the colors of things, how to change what the labels on the SMDs are showing, which is useful stuff, and we'll go into it. But the very first thing I want to show you is the district window button, which controls this table view at the bottom, the spreadsheet that's at the bottom of your map. That's called the district window. And when you click this button that says district window, it takes the table view away from the map and opens it into its own separate web browser window. And then because it's in its own separate web browser window, you can reshape and resize it like you can any web browser window. And I like to make it very tall and thin and put it off to the side because it makes it better to see all the SMDs at once that way. Maybe a little wider than that. And then another thing you can do is at the bottom, there's this kind of page view where it wants you to kind of look at the SMDs 10 at a time and go through the pages, and that's rather cumbersome. So if instead you just click this little drop down with the 10 next to it and just set it to a number that's rather large, it'll put all of them into a single view at once, and you can scroll rather than having to flip through those pages. And I find this is the more useful way to work with this district window since we're working with so many SMDs at once.
Could you show how you did that again? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Yep. And so, by the way, to get back to the starting point, I'll tell you that the way you get back to the starting point, if you want to dock it back down to the bottom, is you just click that district window again, and it will pop back to the map again. It closes the pop-up window and puts it back down at the bottom. So now we're back at how it shows you as a default view, which is really not very useful for SMDs. So on the View tab, that far right button is District Window. When you click it, it takes it away from the map and opens it in a separate window. But that separate window is probably still not sized the way you'd want it to be. So then just resize and reshape it to how you do want it to be. And then down at the bottom where it has the page views and how many results per page, just switch that results per page to the largest, really, so that you get them all at once. One more thing I like to do is if you have the main map kind of fill screen like that, the two windows will kind of get on top of each other, and every time you click on one, you'll hide the other one. So I like to take the map view and just shrink it so that it's not full screen, but all of the screen except for the space taken up by the second window, so that I have my two windows kind of using up all of the screen at once without getting on top of each other and in the way. This is all just my personal preference. Set it up whatever works best for you. It's completely customizable that way. So another point I'd like to bring up about the maps and how they look, because this is also customizable for you, is all the colors of the SMDs are completely changeable. You can set them to as you wish. By default in these templates, what I've done is I've tried to show how the SMDs are there at the same time as the ANCs by having all the SMDs that make up an ANC be in the same kind of family of hues. So you'll see on my screen 7C is all in grays. So at a glance, you can see the extents of 7C, 7D in blues, 7F in purples, that same kind of idea, while still also, to the extent that I can, have used different hues in that group to see the SMD separately as well. You don't have to do it that way, or you may, just like other colors better. Some stand out better than others. So you can change these at any point from the district window, this long list of SMDs. You'll notice there's a color swatch next to each. And if you click the color swatch, it brings up a color selector where you can pick a color and it'll change it on the map to that color. And there's a more page with a second set of hues in this. And so there's about 10, 12 colors in each hue that you can choose from. Again, whatever works for you, personal preference, this is all customizable. And so I'll show some of the other customizations that are in the View tab here. It's mostly controlled by these checkboxes. You'll see the one here that's filled in on my screen says Fill Districts, and there's a checkbox next to it. Its alternative is Display Lines just above it. If you check that one instead, it uses the colors that have been chosen for the SMDs to give them a boundary line that's in that color and leaves the interior empty. It can be harder to tell where they are, but it also has its uses in that, it doesn't obscure what's on the map. So if you were trying to look at what's on the ground in the middle of an SMD and the filled in color was obscuring that to some extent, you could switch it to that display lines view. Again, this is all personal preference, whatever works best for you. And sometimes one way will work better for one task and the other at another task. Just know that these are choices for you to make as you're working. Display names decides whether or not to label the SMDs. I think you're pretty much always going to want that. But if the label's in the way, again, if something you're trying to see, right where it's putting the label, you can turn them off just by checking that box. You can also make them a little smaller by checking this box that says Show District Field. That's the population number. So you can also make the label a little smaller that way if you'd like. Again, all just customizations you can do for how the map looks is the basic idea of what this tab does. It does have some other stuff about how to customize SMDs that we're going to get to when we get into the meat of this stuff, but I'm going to come back to that stuff later.
Yeah, before you continue, can you go back to how you deleted the little white boxes with the number?
Right, so there's a button checkbox that says Display Names on the View tab, and it's just, that's to whether or not you want to have labels displaying them. So checking and unchecking brings them in and takes them out.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep, and then Show District was the one that just kept the label on the screen, but took the population portion of it off.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So I believe that's as much as I want to go over on the View tab for now. And I'm going to show you the next tab, which is Create, some of the tools in it.
Can you show again how to put the district column on the right? I don't know how to do that. Become the right column. I can't do it.
Okay, so your map still looks like this.
It looks
application.
On the bottom, yes.
Right. So whenever you hit when you're on the View tab, the far right button that says District Window, whenever you click that, it's going to pop that table out into a separate window. Now you may get a message that says you're not allowing pop-ups. You may have to tell it explicitly to allow pop-ups. or it may pop up in the background and you'll have to kind of, you know, look in the window behind your main window. It may not show front and center the way mine does.
But how do I get to be in a column? How did you get that over there? How did you do that?
Yep, so it's just a browser window like any web browser window. So you can, as long as it's not full size like that, you can just grab the corner of it and resize it like any browser window and just size it as you wish.
Okay.
And then the very last step is letting it have all the SMDs on the screen at once, because by default it only shows you 10 at a time. And the drop down at the very bottom, you switch from 10 to either 50 or 100 to see them all at once.
Thank you.
Did you say you chose the deviation coloring later? Or I missed that one.
The deviation coloring? Oh,
Yeah,
we're not going to go into this one here because I feel like you really need the colors of the SMDs to see them apart and to see where they go. And if you start using the deviation coloring to tell you when things are above and below, it can be, well, I suppose, never mind, I've talked myself out of that. I don't think you should fill the SMDs themselves in with the color, but there's the option to make the labels let you know when your population is too high or too low. Unfortunately, this doesn't work well until you've already set the number of SMDs correctly, because it doesn't know your target value correctly. It's taking your target value based on the number of SMDs you have and dividing the full ward's population by that number and saying, well, then this must be the correct target. And so using the 2013 SMDs, we generally don't have enough of them because the populations have grown since those were created. And so using the default 39 that Ward 7 had, plus the 4 that have come in from Ward 6, the deviation is, the target is too high, 2200, and that's not correct. So to be honest, the deviation coloring isn't right until we've set the right number of SMDs. So it's kind of like this circular process that I feel like then becomes more trouble than it's worth. I feel like you should just pay attention to the number that's being labeled and know that it's supposed to be between 1900 and 2100. But I will come back to this once we've set these number of SMDs correctly, and that therefore the target is also correct. Then it might be more useful. That's a good point. I did skip that. Okay, so back to the Create tab. I'm going to show you first off the demographics button, which is how you get at what statistical information from the census is being shown to us. And for doing this, I'm going to actually stretch my district window wide again, so you can see all these other fields that are present currently. These are all different statistics about population that the census collects. It's mostly ethnicity data, but there is also voter registration data in there as well. And this set of fields is customizable by you. You don't have to use the ones that are there. You can have more or fewer. And this demographics button on the Create tab is how you do that, how you pick which statistics you want to look at. When you hit that button, you get this dialog, and what it's showing us is a list of groupings of variables. These are all a group of statistic variables. And by default, they're not expanded, and when you expand them, then you can see the variables that are in them. And you'll notice that the field names are really kind of hard to decipher because they have to be kind of short to fit in the tabular view. So you'll also see there's also to the right of that a more verbose description of what that variable actually is, because I mean, I've used this for 6 months now and I still can't remember off the top of my head what GAIAN stands for. I have to look it up. So there's a lot of stuff in here. And by default, what this view is showing you with these fields that are either a blue box or a checked box is whether any of the variables in that group are currently selected to show up in your district window. When a box is blue but not checked, that means some of, but not all of the variables in that group are being included. So you'll see if I expand this, some of them are, some of them are not. You can go through and check all of them. And if I do check all of them, you'll see that the group name then checked to show us that all of them are checked. Alternatively, you can simply check a group name and that'll quickly get you all of the ones in there if you want a full group of them. My recommendation is go through this list of stuff, look at what you like, think about what's useful to you, what isn't useful to you, and then turn off everything else. Because we have a lot of SMDs to work with, and it's a very tall list. If it's also a very wide list, because you have a lot of variables, looking at that view means either you're constantly moving this window back and forth, or you're taking up most of your page with that rather than the map. So I think you should figure out what's important to you and then restrict this view to nothing but the ones that you've decided are important to you so that you can see them at a glance and not take up as much space or any more space than it has to.
I'm sorry, I was trying to follow along. I just didn't see what like I was trying to do it on my screen and missed how you got your demographics.
Right, so there's a button called demographics on the far left of the create tab. And when you click it, it brings up that dialog where you can check the fields. And it's the moment you check one here, it will show up in that district window. There's no like save or go or anything.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So really what I should have done is really taken out a lot of those other ones. I just kind of shrunk the window down so it's not showing me anyway. But yeah, really, if all I wanted to look at was the total population, I would just turn off all of those other ones anyway.
What does OMB stand for? That one is like on a lot of them.
It's Office of Management and Budget. I'm not sure what the reason for their grouping is, but we found their statistics to be the ones that made the most sense for just getting at broader ethnicity categories, and then bringing in separate from that, I think, is where we brought in Hispanic statistics from the standard list. Because in standard, otherwise you're dealing with each ethnicity, non-Hispanic kind of mixed in at the same time, and it gets harder to parse out. So I think the OMB list gave us ethnicities separate from Hispanic, and then standard brought in Hispanic as a third, or as a separate field. Again, these are just the choices we made. You're not in any way required to use our choices. Oh, and I didn't mention the voter registration stuff is toward the bottom. It's a separate group, and it's essentially, what party people are registered. So you get counts of population by party, if that matters. But then, and then there's total voters as a field, but you also get total voters, I believe, from this VAP field. VAP stands for voting age population. So you can get at voting age population by ethnicity as well. It really is quite a lot of different ways to slice it if you're looking to do that. And I think a lot of that was important during the ward level. I confess I'm a little ignorant as to how important that is at the SMD level, but I imagine you guys will know better than me whether you need to look at those statistics or not. So I'm going to go into how to navigate the map now. This is not too complicated, but very important. You're going to want to move around a lot, zoom in and zoom out a lot on the map. And this group of buttons here in the middle, which is like a plus and minus arrows and a hand, is the navigation tools. The farmost one, leftmost one, is a pan. It's called the panning tool. When you click it, whenever you click and drag on the map, it just moves you around without zooming in or out. So it's a way, especially if you're zoomed in far, of just getting around to a different spot while keeping that zoom level that you might find useful at that moment. Zooming in and out, there are many, many ways to do it. I'm going to have you try all of them just to get familiar with them, and then you'll probably just decide which ones you like best and stick with those. There's a plus and minus button on the map in the top left corner. Clicking that will zoom you in and out at a predefined amount with each click. Alternately, you can just double click on the map at any point, and it does exactly the same thing as the plus button does. It zooms you in that same amount as the plus button does. There's no clicking for minus there, so you just have to use the minus button to zoom back out that way. There's also these two zooming tools on the menu, a magnifying glass plus and minus. The way these work, and when you click on one, they work with a click and a drag. So when you click and hold the mouse down and then drag, you'll be dragging a red box on the screen. And when you release the mouse, it will zoom in the map to the extent of the area in that box. So if I wanted to get in nice and close right on this spot on the river, I could drag that box and it'll bring me there right away. The minus tool does a similar thing. It's a little less intuitive because you're zooming out, but the the larger the box you draw, the less it zooms out, and the smaller the box you draw, the more it zooms out. And you'll find out it zooms you out really quite far. Sometimes you can end up looking at the whole world. And I'm doing that to show you that there's a shortcut button on the right end here that looks like a magnifying glass with a map behind it. Or at least that's their intention, but it's so small, it's hard to see that. But this button is a way to just quickly, no matter where you're zoomed in, far or close, to just jump back to the extents of the plan you're looking at. So if I've accidentally zoomed all the way out to Europe, or if I've accidentally zoomed into just one person's house, you can quickly just jump right back to the full plan with that button. If you're using a computer mouse that has a scroll wheel, you can also just zoom in and out by scrolling the wheel forward and backward. That also works. So there's lots of different ways to zoom in and out. You'll just eventually you'll decide that one particular one is the one you like and not worry about the others. These two arrows are history level buttons. So it's as you've panned and zoomed around the map, it's remembering what you've done. So you can kind of work backward through that history by going like that. So if I was working in one SMD on one side of the ward, and then I jumped right to another one, if I wanted to quickly get back to that first one, I could just use my history buttons to zoom back, or to travel backwards through the history of what I did. And then the forward button does the same thing through the forward of the history. So with zooming in and out, that brings us to scale, which is more important than you'd think because of the census geographies, blocks, block groups, and tracts. I'm going to zoom in and out a bunch, and what I'm going to show you is that as I zoom in and out a bunch, there's a scale bar, and it tells me what the scale is, and that's not necessarily useful. But there's also a scale bar, which also on its own would not be necessarily useful, except that there's a yellow tick mark that as I zoom out and it travels the scale bar, it shows me what my scale is from that yellow tick mark. And it's also showing me with these magenta tick marks, scales where the map is going to switch which census geography it's showing me. Remember, there are these three levels. There's the census blocks, which are very small, and then there are the block groups, which are larger, and then there are the tracts, which are larger than that. And as you zoom further out, it shows you the larger geometries. It switches what's being shown on the map. And it's also switching which ones you're going to be manipulating when you manipulate things. And probably we don't even want to touch tracts or block groups. We're going to always want to work with the smallest pieces we can. And so it's important as you're zooming in and out on the map to look at this heading above the scale bar, and it's also above the navigation tools that says display level and selection level, and check that it says block whenever you want to start messing with boundaries, because you don't want to mess with, you probably don't want to grab entire census tracts and throw them from one SMD to another. You probably want to work with the census blocks, the smallest pieces we can. So just as you zoom in and out, check this part of the create tab to make sure you're working with blocks, because that's the pieces you probably do want to be working with. And so the last thing I'm going to show you before I have you practice some of this stuff is this base map button. The base map refers to everything in the background of the map other than the SMDs themselves and the census geographies, which are the thin black lines. So these thin black lines are the census blocks, even though they mostly follow the streets. That's actually the boundaries of census blocks. And then, the colored in areas are the SMDs we're creating. Everything else is in the base map. And you're not restricted to the base map that's there. You can use this button, and it'll open a dialog, and there are other base maps you can choose from. The vast majority of them are just different styles of maps. It's still just map information in the background, just different ways of symbolizing it. And you can work with whichever one works best for you. Darker is easier on your eyes at night, I find. So these are all essentially the same information, just drawn differently. But the first two are categorically different. These are actually aerial photography in the background. So if you use one of these, imagery or imagery with labels, you're looking at an aerial photo of what is really there on the ground. You can inspect that. And this is a place where it might be handy to do that thing I mentioned in the View tab, where you use the colors assigned to the SMDs as boundary lines rather than fill-in patterns, so that it doesn't obscure the aerial photo if that's something you want to look at.
Dennis, this is Don Friedman. Can you double back one question? How did we get from census tracts to blocks and back to blocks?
So the software does that to you automatically, which, you know, automatic is nice, except for when it's taking the control away from you. And it's
Mine has me a tract, for example. I don't know how to get out of tract to block.
It's completely dependent on how far you're zoomed in or out.
Oh, I see. I see.
Zoom it in, and eventually, once the yellow tick mark passes,
I got it. Thank you very much. I see. Got it. Thank you so much.
So yeah, it's always good because they look the same. It always uses this thin black line to represent the census geography. Whether you're looking at blocks, groups, blocks, or tracts, it always looks the same, except that they happen to be bigger areas when they're tracts. So really, this heading right here is the only warning you get that you're working with blocks or not. So it's important to keep that in mind. So I'm going to go back to the View tab and fill my SMDs back in. Oops, that was the wrong button. This one. And go back to that Create tab and show you the base maps again. So again, you can switch the base map at any time to whatever one works for you, and not just once, but as many times as you want. So if you want to have a quick look at an aerial photo, zoom in, you can do that, and then switch back to streets. That's the default one that the application gives you in the templates. Whatever base map is present when you hit save, that's the one that'll show up the next time it's opened. But again, at any point, you're always free to change it yet again by using this base map button on the Create tab. So with that, I'm going to have you guys practice the stuff we just went over so that it sticks a little better. I'm going to put an exercise slide up saying these things. But what I would like you to do is pop that district window out and resize and reshape it in a way that works for you. Not necessarily the way I did it, but whatever you think is the way it's going to work for you to do your work. And then I want you to use the panning and zooming tools, all of them, just to find out how they work for you so you can decide which ones you like best. And then also change the base map to a different base map style. And ask any questions as they arise as you're doing these things.
So I'm going back to the choose template plan all the way from the beginning.
Okay, so you've started over, right?
Yeah, and just try to see what I remember and work my way to where you are.
Okay.
I do remember in the beginning you said that there are various template plans that you can select. So I'm looking at Ward 4.
Right, there should be two for each ward. One that gives us the 2013 SMDs and one that gives us a blank slate to work from, which will be much more complicated, and I'll go into that later. For now, I want you to open the Ward 7 one that's not the blank one, because I want us all to work on the same exercise together, even if it's not the ward that you're actually a member of the task force of.
Yep, I see it. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, got it.
And then remember, saving your own copy of it, because you won't be able to save changes to the template. You'll be able to make changes, but you won't be able to save them.
Right.
So can I ask everyone to remember mute your microphone unless you're asking a question, just to keep the background noise to a minimum? I should do the same while you guys are exercising, to be honest.
Dennis, this is Ken Jarbo. Quick question on the underlying data while we're doing our exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Where you've populated it with the existing SMDs, I take it the data that is represented there is the data from the 2020 census, as if that SMD was part of the new wards. For example, I just take 6B09. The 6B09 that's there is a different shape than the current 6B09.
So for each template, I've only included the portion of the SMD that was included in the new ward. And it's an approximation. I mean, this isn't a reference material. This is just like a launching off point to make it easier to get started rather than having to build all of these 40 polygons by hand yourself.
Right, okay, got it, thanks.
Another thing that's an approximation is that this application does not let us break the census blocks themselves into smaller pieces, but the existing SMDs do that in some cases. So the real actual SMD boundaries from 2013 in some cases are not the same as these. These are just me making the best approximation I can out of the whole census blocks.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
Dennis, it's Polkut area on Ward 2. The other night during the meeting of our redistricting committee, one of our members, I think it was Barbara, inquired whether these numbers are actually accurate, because there were two of the tables where they didn't add up together. And Dr. Phillips undertook to just ensure that they were the correct ones. Are you aware that these are now the correct 2020 data?
So the answer is that these numbers are these are the sums of census blocks.
Okay.
And this, like I just said, the SMDs don't always use whole census blocks. Sometimes the SMDs break the boundary line goes down the middle of a block. And so if there's 100 people in that census block and the line went right down the middle, 50 go to one SMD and 50 go to the other, this application can't represent that. So this application is summing whole census blocks. So these numbers these are the 2020 numbers. These are the populations from the 2020 census, but they're aggregated to whole census blocks, whereas the 2013 SMDs don't always follow the same boundaries as the census blocks. So they're an approximation. The tables are the actual true numbers incorporating the splits of census blocks that the current SMDs take. So again, this application these templates I've made are not the reference material. These are not the answer to exactly what is the current SMD's real population. It's as close to an approximation as I could get without splitting the blocks, because I can't split them in this application. But those tables and maps do have the true accurate numbers incorporating the split blocks.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll find out how much of the splitting, I don't want to say inaccurate, but how much these numbers on these maps differ from the actual numbers with the split census blocks once we start playing with it. Is that more or less correct?
So the answer is that, these are the real numbers from the census for the census blocks. And if you were to split a block, then we have to do further analysis on the splits. What we do is a thing called proportional weighting, where wherever the line is split, we have a data layer that's a dot for every housing unit in the district. And we just count the number of housing units on each side of the split. And so say if 31% of the housing units in a block are on one side and 69% are on the other side, we just split the population according to that 69-31 split. That's the best approximation we can come up with.
Okay, thank you.
So I believe everyone should have had time to do that, zooming and panning kind of stuff. Are there any questions about that, or can we jump on into the next thing?
Well, I just had one question again on the demographics thing. I'm wondering what the difference is between OMB, non-Hispanic and standard, and then OMB, regular as compared to the alternative, because it looks like they're looking at the same stats. So what's the difference?
So in the standard list, there's white non-Hispanic, black non-Hispanic, essentially each of the ethnicity categories, and also non-Hispanic. And then there's another one for Hispanic at the top. The OMB one is each ethnicity category broken out with no further sub-calculation on Hispanic origin. And then you see what I'm saying? So this one is someone who self-reported as white and did not, and it's irrelevant of whether they said Hispanic or non-Hispanic.
Yeah, but that's the same as the alternative, isn't it? what you said, and then if you look
Sorry,
at
I
OMB,
didn't look at alternative. That,
yeah.
I don't know. Are the numbers the same then? There may be a sort of duplication. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, and then if you look at OMB non-Hispanic, that's the same categories as standard.
To be honest, I can't tell you I know the answer to that. There are demographers in our state data center who know this stuff inside and out, and I am not them. I'm the GIS guy. So I know how to do the mapping stuff. I don't know the finer points of the demographic statistics.
Okay, that makes sense.
My supervisor Joy though is the state data center supervisor and is a demographer and could answer these questions better. She may do so in the chat, but again, I don't have the chat window open to show you the map. But I know I fumbled that question pretty hard, but I guess my answer is I don't know.
So I'm from Ward 6, and since there were really big changes to the ward lines that in some cases cut across neighborhoods, one of the things that I think we're going to talk about is the possibility of having ANCs that span multiple wards. Is there a way to, like, is there a map template we can choose that lets us draw into other wards?
There isn't. It's possible to make that. It's a bit of work to make these templates, and to be perfectly honest, that's on the technical side is yes, I can do it, but I wouldn't know where to do it until someone told me what boundaries to use. And so I think the answer has to be first someone saying yes, and then saying specifically how or where's the better way to use that. The answer is no. With the templates as set up, you can't. But if someone can define the new area that they would like to do that in, I could then go and create said template that included that area. But that's more of a politics question than I'm authorized to have an answer to as to where that expansion would be.
Thanks.
But yes, the software can do it, but as set up, doesn't. Or I'm sorry, as the template is set up, it doesn't. Okay, so I'm going to get now into the meat of this tool where we're actually defining these boundaries, because that's the task we're actually here to do, and that's what you all want to know how to do.
Dennis,
yes.
This is Joy. I'd sort of jump in late. Let me answer the person in terms of the difference in the OMB.
Oh, good, because I don't know that.
Right. So the OMB is strictly the one race or the race alone category. You have the white, black, Asian, and so on. And then you have the two or more race fitting in there. You might have black and white, Asian and white, and so on and so on. The OMB VAP, that's the voting age population. So that's the 18 and over. And then they repeat the same categories.
Oh, just lost you, Joey.
Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Joy.
Yeah, sorry. So I said the first set is just a straight race alone, and then it goes into the multi-race where you have black, white, black and white, Asian and white, and you have a combination there. When you get to the OMB, the voting age population, it repeats those same categories again, but it's just that it's the 18 and over. When you get to the OMB non-Hispanic, so every race category will be white, non-Hispanic, black, non-Hispanic, and so on and so on. Okay, if that's not enough, then just contact me tomorrow and we can discuss it again. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy.
Okay. Let me pick up where I was here again. Give me just a moment. Yes, okay. We're in the Create tab still, and this is where we're going to actually start changing the boundaries of SMDs.
I'm sorry, I can't see the map. I'm just seeing everyone else's face. I think
I can't see it either.
Yeah.
Is that universally true? I think that might be just how you have your
it's
set up.
not showing.
No, the map
It's not showing.
Yeah, you're not sharing.
Oh, maybe it's
universal.
No, I didn't actually stop sharing, but you're right. It doesn't show it sharing anymore. Give me a moment to find where that button is.
I'm seeing it now.
That should be, is that working now?
Yeah, now it's working.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't explain why it went away. I certainly didn't turn it off. Okay, so back in the map, The first thing you'll notice is that I am not looking at blocks. You should always check that. Not looking at blocks, I'm looking at block groups. So zoom in more until it shows you blocks. And that's when it's safe to start moving things around. The way this process works is additive. You always pick an SMD that you would like to add census blocks to. Now, by default, since they're all assigned already, that you'll be taking them away from some other one. But the way the interface works is you always pick an SMD and then you start picking the blocks that get added to it. So the way you pick an SMD is there's two ways and they are interconnected to each other. You can either just click the name of one in the district window list. You'll see when I do, it highlights it. Alternately, there is a drop down there in the Create tab that has a list of all the SMDs, and you can pick it from that list. Either one works exactly the same way, and whichever one you choose, it'll get reflected in the other. So as I pick one from the drop down, it changes what's highlighted in the district window. And when I choose one in the district window, it changes what's chosen in the drop down. So it's just a matter of whichever one you like to use better. So you always pick one here first. You pick the one you want to add to, and then you go and you start adding things to it. So I'm going to zoom in.
I'm sorry, when you say pick one, I'm clicking it, it's not doing, like, what am I supposed to see?
So it just highlights the row. If you're using the district window to do that, it should just highlight it in gray, that row for that SMD.
Okay.
And it'll also change which one is listed on this district dropdown on the toolbar. Do you see that? There's nothing on the map that shows you which one you have chosen. It's strictly a row in the table gets highlighted and the selection gets made in the dropdown. That's the only indicator of which one is the active selected SMD. It probably should also highlight it on the map, but it doesn't. So I'm going to pick 6A07, this one at the top left corner of my map, by highlighting it on the district window, and it also selected it in the dropdown. And then there's this a set of four tools immediately under that dropdown. And these are the buttons that you use to pick census blocks. They are selecting by clicking a point, selecting by dragging a rectangle, selecting by dragging a complex shape, and selecting by dragging a complex line. And I'm going to go over each of them for you. The first one, the simplest one, is select census blocks by just clicking a point. When I choose this tool and I click on the map, any census block that is under the spot where I clicked will get assigned to the SMD that I have chosen either in the district window or from the dropdown. So I've chosen 6A07 and I'm using that tool. And when I click here, it'll now start assigning those blocks to that SMD. And you'll see the map changes, and on the fly, the population label also changes, and the population of the district window itself and any other statistical fields you have open will also all change on the fly as you make these changes. So it's all interconnected. The map and the data are one and the same, and on the fly both are updated as you make edits. The next way to select is with this drag a box button. This one works the way that zoom in button that I showed you earlier does, where you click and hold the mouse down and drag a box. And when you let go, any blocks that are touching that rectangle, not necessarily entirely within it, but just touching it in any way whatsoever. So I'll just go barely over the line to this next one. You'll see all three of those get added in. I'll drag another box. The next tool over is by drawing a complex polygon. When you do this one, every time you click, you get an angle point on a polygon. And so you drag around and make a very complicated shape. And then you double click to end it. And then just like with the rectangle tool, any block that is underneath that complex polygon gets added to the SMD that's selected. And then the last tool is a line. It works very similar to that polygon tool, where every click gives you a new angle point. And when you're ready to finish the line, you double click it, and any census block that's touching that line gets added in. So you can see I've now made that SMD really big, far larger than it's supposed to be, which is a good place to introduce the undo button. These two blue arrows, which look very similar to the view history arrows, are your undo and redo history buttons. You click this button and it'll just undo whatever the last thing you did was. And it has a history of, I don't know, maybe a dozen up to 15 of the last changes you made. So it's a good way to just undo an oopsie, because oopsies will happen. It's guaranteed. So just get to know this undo and redo button in your history here. The next thing I want to show you is a thing called locking. You can temporarily lock an SMD and also a census block from being assigned. So it's kind of like a write protect kind of feature to how would I explain that? To be careful to when you're say I'm working on what am I going to do here? Say I'm working on 6B10, and I know I want to make some changes to it, but I know I don't want to change 6B09. I want to make sure I don't accidentally make any changes to 6B09 while I'm working around it. So what I can do is that 6B09 in the table, every single SMD has this column that says lock with a checkbox next to it. If you check the box next to the name of an SMD, it'll fill it in with a hatch pattern on the screen, and it is now locked. And there's a checkbox in the lock box now. What that means is that no matter what I do with these tools, no matter which SMD I'm working on, I cannot accidentally take census blocks away from 6B09 while it's locked. So I'm going to make an example here of 6B10. Say that's the one I'm working on, and I want to start adding census blocks to it. And if I drag this big box like this, I'm only going to be able to get the blocks that are coming from 7F07. It's going to ignore any block from 6B09 that I included because 6B09 is locked. See, that's what it did. Do it again, grab some stuff from 6B09 and it ignores that and just, oops, I didn't mean to zoom in, and just grabs the ones from the neighboring ones instead. Let me undo those. Similarly, there's these two padlock buttons on the toolbar. These let you lock and unlock individual census blocks rather than entire SMDs. So if you check the lock next to an SMD, all the blocks in that SMD are locked. If instead you just said, hey, you know, I just want to make sure I don't accidentally mess with the boundary that's next to 6B10. If you use this padlock tool, everywhere you click on the map, the census block under that spot will be locked and write protected so that it can't be accidentally moved. So now you'll see if I go back and say I want to start editing 6B10, I drag a rectangle, some of 6B09 can come along, but not the ones that were locked. So it's a way to just do the same thing that we did with this checkbox, but just to individual census blocks, if that's instead what you want to kind of protect as you're working. And if you want to unlock them again later, the unlocked padlock button, you choose that, and you have to click on each block individually to unlock them again. And once they're unlocked, then they can be added to any SMD once they get selected, like that. So I will show you back on the View tab. I had skipped over this because I think there's a tool they include that I think is so non-useful and actually harmful that I almost was not going to tell you about it, but I do want to tell you about it. There's a checkbox that says display locks, and by default it's checked. And what that means is, hey, when you lock something, I'm going to let you know. If you uncheck that box, it just stops letting you know. The stuff is still locked. It's still not able to be changed to a different SMD, but the software isn't showing you that information anymore. It's hidden from you. I don't know why you would want to hide information from yourself, so I recommend that you always make sure that this box is checked so that when something is locked, you know that it is because it's showing it to you. Was there something else to show? Oh, there is also a hide button next to this hot lock button. Every SMD has a checkbox for hide. And what that means is when you check that box, the SMD is just not shown to you anymore. It's hidden. It's still in the map. It's still there. And if it's not locked, you can still add things from it to another SMD. So again, this is a bad one, I think. Unless you're also locking it and you just want to take it out of your view while it's locked, I don't think it's ever a good idea to hide an SMD from yourself. For instance, I'll choose to add things to 6B10, and I'm going to hide 6B09. You'll find that even though I can't see 6B09, I can still steal the census blocks from it, which is pretty confusing. So I recommend really not using the hide button unless it's also in conjunction with the lock button and you're like, this one's done. I'm sure I like the boundary just the way it is. I'm going to lock it and I'm going to hide it, and then it's out of my consideration. That's really the only use case I can think of for the hide button. So with that, I'm going to have you, no, I'll show you one more button. I'm sorry. This button right here, this zoom to selected button. It's a shortcut navigation tool that for some reason isn't with the other navigation tools. And all it is whichever SMD you've currently got chosen from your district window or from your district dropdown, whichever one it is, if you hit that button, it'll take the map to that spot. So if for some reason you've got one chosen, but you're not there yet, it's just a quick way to zoom to that specific SMD. No idea why it's not grouped with the rest of the navigation tools though. And so with that, we're going to do an exercise and practice these things I just showed you. And I want you all to definitely ask me questions now, because these are the meat and potatoes of the application. These are the tools you really need to know how to use. So I want you to go to 7C, ANC 7C. And I want you to lock 2 of the SMDs from edits. I want you to lock 7C04 and 7C06. And I want you to do some reassignments of the ones around it. I want you to use all 4 of those tools, the point, the rectangle, the polygon, and the line selector, to assign blocks to 7C01, 2, 3, and 5. And I don't even have to tell you this because you'll know it on your own, but use those undo and redo buttons when something happened that you didn't want to happen, because that's always going to be the case. Even for me, that's the case. And I'll say one more time, the first thing you do before you move anything around is you make sure that the screen is showing you census blocks and not census block groups or census tracts. It's awfully quiet. Anyone, any questions?
Once I undo everything, I can't redo it. I can't go back to what I had just undone.
I mean, does the forward arrow isn't working?
No, no.
I mean, there's a limit. You know, you can only go forward to as far as you've done something, and then it's grayed out after that.
Okay, so I did everything you asked us to do, and then I undid it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm trying to just do it again by doing the redo, but the redo button is not even available. It's not painted in. It's not colored.
I don't understand that. That's interesting. Let me make some changes myself and see what happens. Sorry, I've already forgotten which ones I was supposed to lock. 7C and 4 and 6. So I've made some changes. Undo them. Did you hit save at any point? I think once you hit save, you lose your ability to undo and redo.
No, I didn't. But yeah, I can see that you're doing it. So I don't know why I'm not, but I see that it can be done. Okay.
Okay, can you try some more edits and see if that kind of fixes it? I mean, see if it was a one-time mistake or if this is a more frequent thing.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else a question? Bring the slide back up.
I don't know if you're going to talk. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you can go first.
I don't know if you're going to talk about this later, but is there a way, like, let's say you make a bunch of changes and you're like, this one ANC or SMD, I didn't like the changes I made, and revert just that SMD back to the way it originally was, you know?
Nope. I mean, there's the history that's chronological, and that's really not that far. It's, you know, it's maybe a dozen to 15 clicks. So if you're, the only way I could think of doing that is, you know, doing a save as you're working on different things, so you can get back to it. But no, there's no specific undoing. There's just the chronological undoing.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I have a question, but if it's jumping ahead, you can skip it for now. Which is, I found a spot that lets me add new SMDs, but I haven't found a way to rename those once I've added them.
Definitely
like
skipping ahead. Yep, that's the next thing.
Cool.
Because in addition to making changes to the boundaries of the SMDs here, you are all gonna have to also add new SMDs, probably perhaps take some away as well. Rename existing ones. I doubt Ward 7 wants to bring in Ward 6 ANCs necessarily and still call them that. Maybe not. So yeah, how to change the names of them, how to make more of them, how to remove some of them. That's what we'll do in the next exercise or next instruction.
Can you show how to do the blocks again? I'm very lost. I thought I mean, I know how to do the polygram, whatever it is, but Polygon, but I just need to see it one more time. Like I checked the box for the.
So again, it's always the first thing. Well, the first thing, let me say it again, is to make sure you're looking at blocks and not block groups.
How do you tell that?
The software will switch it automatically once you zoom in far enough. If you zoom out too far, it'll switch to the other kinds. So just, if it says block group or tract, just zoom in more and it'll switch you to blocks.
Okay.
And then you always pick the SMD you want to add to, never the one you want to take away from. And once you've picked it, either from the district window or the drop down, which is not what's on my screen right now, so let me jump there. So I've picked 6B10, and I want to add to it. Then you use any one of these 4 tools to add census blocks to it. Did it matter which one I went over, or is there a specific one you want me to use?
No, it doesn't matter.
Any of them? Okay, so So the simplest one is just the point tool, and that's literally click on the map and the spot where you clicked, that one block moves over.
Okay.
And that works, and that's usually the way to get at really tiny slivery type blocks, you know, that are hard to drag a box on or something.
Okay.
But if you're really looking to grab a bigger area at once, you know, there's several at once you want to get, like, let me go to here, 7B03. Let's say I want to bring in these 3 all at once, you can drag a box around an area, and if you're careful about it, you can bring in multiples at once that way. So again, you pick the one you want to add to, and then you use these tools to start picking the blocks that are getting added.
Okay.
And then the polygon tool is just a way to get at a very convoluted shape. Like if I wanted to bring in this circle and the ones north of it, and it'd be hard to drag a rectangle to do that, I can just draw a special shape that gets just in there. And you'll see what I did. I accidentally grabbed that one, which is an example of why the undo button is there. Try it again. I can drag a very specific shape that gets just the blocks I wanted. That's the idea behind that tool. And to be honest, the line tool actually is better for that sometimes, because you can really wiggle around very specifically with the line tool. You don't have to worry about closing the loop on the polygon.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Now I have a quick question about the Polygon tool. When you draw it, is it best to double click as you lift up your mouse, or how do you make your settings? That's where I'm having trouble.
Right. So the rectangle tool is a holding down the mouse tool. You click and you hold, and as you drag while you're still holding it, it makes the shape, and then you just let go to finish it. But the polygon and the line tool work differently. Those ones, you just, every time you click, you get one angle point. So you click, and then you're not holding the mouse anymore as you move it around. And then when you want the next angle point, you click again, and you click again. And then when you're done and you have your last angle point to close it, that's when you double click. Right there was my double click. And that's when it does the assignment. So you're kind of sketching, and then when you're done, you double click it, and that's when it does the actual grabbing of the blocks.
Hey, Barbara asked in a second, is there a way to see the population counts in each census block as a tag?
So unfortunately, the map won't let us label them, which would, I think, be very useful to just have a label on the screen for each one. So there is, and unfortunately, I find it to be no more useful than just adding the block and seeing how the population changes. But I'll show you how it's done. There is a tool called the I tool, which is with the navigation tools, the identify tool. It's a little lowercase I in a blue circle. And when you click that button, a window pops out from the side of the map with a dialog on the screen. And now you have the I tool active. You'll see my cursor is turned into that button. And anywhere I click on the map, it will, that was a bad choice because it's yellow, but anywhere you click on the map, it highlights the block that you've clicked on in yellow. And then it shows you the statistical information it knows about that block in this table view on the left. And by default, it's showing you the entire universe of every census that variable it knows about, which is too much. So instead, what you can do is there's this checkbox just below it that says use grid demographics only. When you check that, it shows you the set of variables that you've chosen for your demographic window. So if you've only chosen a couple, you only get a couple. I think mine is showing about 10, so you see the 10 that were there. And then as you click around the map, it'll show you those numbers for that individual census block. And when you're done using it, if you don't want that yellow highlight to live with you for the rest of your life, you have to hit this clear button to take that highlighting off the map. Unfortunately, just switching to a different tool doesn't make that highlight go away. So you have to click clear, and then it takes it away. And then you can either switch to a new tool, or you can just hit this little triangle button to make that window go away again. But again, it's one at a time, and it's manual clicking to see that information. Personally, I find it's faster just to, if I want to find out what this block's population is going to do to this SMD, it's frankly faster to just click on it and see how much the number went up or by, because you have to click once just to see the difference. So yeah, the information is available, but unfortunately, I feel like it's not being made available in a very useful way.
So Dennis, the information is available only in the block on the right there. It's not available any place on the main screen.
Unfortunately, we can't label it on the map. It seems like a very large oversight on their part, the application developers, because there's plenty of room here. I mean, it would be nice to just have each of these blocks labeled with their populations. So I could just see, hey, this block right here, how many people does it have? Should I add it to this SMD? That could be very useful. And the answer is, yeah, it would be, but we can't.
All right, thanks.
So if there's no other questions about how to use these tools, we're going to do that next thing that I alluded to, where we can make changes to the number of SMDs we have and what those SMDs are called. And non-intuitively, the place to do that is backward on the View tab where we came from earlier. It is not in the Create tab. So on the View tab, there's a button called Modify Districts. By the way, this software in general, they use the word district to refer to the political boundaries that we're making. You know, it's a redistricting application. They use it for census or congressional districts. We use it for wards. We're using it for SMDs. So they don't know all the different words people have for their boundaries. You know, there's parish, there's all sorts of stuff. So they just generically call everything a district. So whenever you see the word district, just know that in our case, it means SMDs. So modify districts means modify the SMDs. When you click on that button, you'll get this modified districts window, and it has a long tabular view of all the currently created SMDs. In this template, there are 39. And it's also showing us the name of them. The name is given twice, short name and long name, because we have the option of, if we did have a more verbose naming of these things, we could give the abbreviated name and the long name, and then there's an ability to change the labels to show the longer or the shorter one. In these templates, I just gave them all the same short name. I didn't see a reason to call it single member district 6A07 and have that be a label. If you do want that, you can just come in here and change the long name to whatever more verbose variety you'd like instead. You will have to go through and type it in for every single one of them individually, unfortunately. But that's how that's done. So this is the dialog where you, like I just said, you can change the name of an SMD. So if Ward 7's task force doesn't want to keep these SMDs called 6A or 6B, and they wanted to incorporate them into another ANC, say they're going to newly create 7A, or they're going to add new ones onto the end of 7F, this is where you would come in and type those new numbers in for those SMDs. The other thing this dialog can do is remove an SMD. So if you want to get rid of one, you highlight it and hit the remove button. There's no undo button for that, like there is for moving census blocks around. So other than not saving and then reopening the plan, there's no way to undo that. So be careful when you click remove that you really mean to remove them. And then to add a new SMD is not in that dialog. It is over here where it says number of districts. And you'll see right here, there's a 39 and there's an up and a down arrow, and I can actually just click in here and change it. If you want to make new ones, this is where you increase the number. You just say, okay, I want to make one more SMD that I don't currently have. You either just hit the up arrow to turn it to 40, or you just double click in here and type 40. And as soon as you do that, there will be a new SMD in the list, at the bottom of the list, with a generic number assigned to it. And if you go back into the modified districts window, scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see that newly created one with not a number that is of any use to us. And you'll also notice, or you won't notice, but if I point it out to you, you'll see that this target value also went down, because what this target value is really doing is it's just taking the population of the ward and dividing it by the number of SMDs we tell it we want. It's a little cumbersome, because really what we'd like to do is work backwards and say, I want a target of 2,000. Can you tell me how many SMDs that is? Can't get there that easily other than through trial and error. So if I say 42, that's pretty close. Say 42. So we added 3 new ones. Now when I go back to modify districts, you see the target value is 2040, and there are 3 new ones down here. To make it simple, I'm just going to continue on 7E and just make them follow from there. And just give these new numbers 7E, 08, 9, and 10. This is just for learning how to do this stuff. Don't in any way construe this to be my opinion of what should be, because I don't have one. Oops, I should type the right thing. As you can see, this is really cumbersome to do this. So that's the reason why I made these templates in advance, so that you didn't have to do this 42 times. You can start from a number that's probably a pretty close approximation to how many you want. And at least the labels and the color swatches are already done for you, and it's just up to you to move the boundaries around. So I've added those 3 new names. I hit OK. And what you'll see is that they exist in the lists. I can see them in the district window, but they're nowhere on the map. They don't exist on the map yet. And that's because we haven't assigned any census blocks to them. And the only way we can do that is by taking them away from somewhere else. And again, because I just made this up out of the blue, it's not going to make any sense whatsoever to do so for these new 3 SMDs. So I'm just making an example to show how this works. Once you've created them and they're in the list, and you see they have 0 population based on the district window, adding things to them works just like adding things to an existing SMD, because they do exist. They just don't have any blocks assigned to them yet. So you pick one in the list by highlighting it or from the dropdown, and then you use any one of these create tools, and you just start clicking on census blocks that should belong to it. And there, I've just made 7E08 exist out of nowhere by assigning 4 blocks from 7F03 to it. So then I can do the same thing from 7E09. I don't know why it keeps jumping my view, but 7E09 is 730E09 is still highlighted. And then when I click on the map, it should start adding those to that SMD. And then the last one, 7E10, just grab a few from 7E01, say. So I have 3 new SMDs, and you'll notice the color swatches are also just randomly assigned, so they're not in any way matching the rest of the SMD or the ANC. So another thing you might go into when you're creating new SMDs is picking colors for them, either, and I made this mistake in the first tutorial, either with a color that's really standing out differently than everything else, so you can tell very clearly which one it is you're working on, or with a color that's in the same color palette as the rest of that ANC, so that once you're finished with it, it kind of joins the group and makes 7E stand out in a whole for you. I think the workflow might be best to say, pick a color that nothing else is using, so that when you're working with it, you can see clearly which one you're doing. And then once it's done, or close enough to done, then pick a color that joins the rest of the ANC, so that it kind of joins the family and you can see the ANC at a glance. And then you might have to do some back and forth. You know, 7E08 and 7E03 are exactly the same color, so it might be hard to tell where the boundary is. So I go back and pick a different green, and you kind of just, you know, work it out until you get what you like, because it's completely up to you. So I think I'm going to just do that whole thing over again to help reinforce it. And then I'm going to have you guys do the same thing. Undo does not remove them. So let me go back to the View tab in the Modify Districts window and find those 3 new ones and remove them. And start over again. One more time, just quickly going through without explaining too much. I know I want 3 new SMDs for this ward. The way to do that is on the View tab, you just make this number bigger. I'm just going to type it in this time, say 42. The moment I do that, in Modified Districts, I now have to give them a label, a name, because it just picks numbers randomly. Or it has some logic, I'm sure, but I don't know what that logic is. And you need to do it twice, both in the short name and in the long name. Say okay. And then once they exist in the list, then you pick them from the list and use the create tools to say what census blocks belong to them. So I picked 7008s, just grab some randomly because I'm just making an example. 7009, 7010, oops, I didn't mean to pick the color just yet, but I should, right? That was what I said to do. 7010, let's say bright red. And now when I say what 7010 gets made from, those should have been, oop, I did not change my selector. Undo. 7010 and they're red. And then lastly, once you've finished creating them, bring them into the family by giving them a color that matches the rest of their ANC so that you can tell that that's the ANC they're a member of. I mean, you can still tell from the label, but it's just helpful visually to have them all be in the same palette. Yeah, that is the thing that you are now going to do yourselves. So we're going to go to the exercise slide, and I want you to take those SMDs that came from Ward 6, the yellow ones on the left, and just rename them without changing their boundaries to 7A01 through A04. And I want you to create a new SMD and name it 7D08 and add some blocks to it and give it a color that matches the rest of the ANC. Essentially, you're going to do the same thing I just did twice and ask questions as they come up. Okay, does anyone have any questions with this yet? I know this is probably the more complicated part of the whole process, really, because it's all split up among different tabs and different tools.
Is 7D08 supposed to be touching at all points?
So yeah, SMDs have to be contiguous. Unfortunately, because we can't split blocks in this application, sometimes it won't be, because you'll want to split a block that's, some silly spaghetti noodle of a block that runs along a road for half a mile, but the software doesn't let you do that. So we're not enforcing that as a rule in the application, even though it's a real rule for what your actual SMDs would have to be once we're done.
Gotcha.
Essentially, we feel like there's going to be a process probably where we're going to use this tool to figure things out and get the population counts. And then there's going to be some fine tuning of where blocks don't allow us to do the common sense think we need to, and just finish them off in GIS software where we can split those blocks.
Thanks.
But yes, they all have to be contiguous. There's not allowed to be like the Hawaiian Island chain of an SMD.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Once we've done the assignment, or approximately, how do we save it, or should we save it?
So you just go back to the file tab and either hit save or save as if you want to give it a different name. If it's still just the original template, you'll have to do a save as because you can't overwrite the template. But if you still are working with your own copy from the beginning, then you can just hit save and it'll update it with what's existing right now. So once you have hit save, or if you already had saved, you'll find that on that open dialog that we showed early on, under the My Plan section, you'll now have at least one file and possibly more than one if you've done a save as more than once. And that's how you'll get back to it. I mean, if this was your real work, the next time you opened the application, rather than starting from scratch again, after the application made you open a template, you'd immediately go to that open dialog and go to your My Plans folder and find the one you were working on previously. Okay, well, we're going to move on to the next thing. I know we're running low on time here, so I saved the less core things till the end. This stuff I felt like was the most important part to learn. But under the review tab are some reporting functionality that we can get at. We can get statistical graphs and charts and reports of our plans and the demographic data that goes along with them. I feel like they can be a little cumbersome for a set of 40 entities. They were more easy to deal with when we were talking about 8 wards. So a lot of these charts are going to maybe not be so useful, but under reports, they might be more useful, where you can generate tabular and textual reports on the boundaries as you've created them. So for instance, I open up a population summary report and it'll just give me essentially, your district window data in a tabular format that you can then share outside of the application, is what these report functions are good for. And there's actually one in here that's different than most. It's called the meets and bounds report, which will generate a text description of the boundary for you, that we're going to ultimately need for the legislation. The one to pick is meets and bounds HTML without TLIDs. And I know that's a lot of alphabet soup. TLIDs is the term that the census uses for their identifiers for each of the sides of the blocks. Ultimately, we don't want to have those mixed into our description, so we say without that. When you say okay to that, it will make a text file, and each SMD's boundary is described in wherever it knows the boundary description. So the census geographies actually have attribute information on them that says what those boundaries are made out of. Like if the boundary of a block is 19th Street, it knows that. And if that was the border of your SMD, it can use that information, and then it just describes the boundary of the SMD that way. These descriptions aren't exactly the same format that we'll put into our final legislation. The legislation generally doesn't include the distances along each of these segments. We usually just say along 19th Street until its intersection with, and then whatever the next thing it runs into. But this is still, 3/4, 90% of the way there, and that it's already written for you, and you just have to kind of excise the superfluous information and maybe format it a little. There is a problem in that sometimes the attribute of what a census block's boundary isn't known. The census just didn't tally that information in there. Maybe it's an alleyway that doesn't have a name, or a stream that they didn't know the name of. And so sometimes in your description, you'll get something that just says along unnamed boundary. And that means that the software didn't know what the name of that boundary on that edge of that census block was. And so you'll have to go back and actually figure out what it is that you're following, which, as local authorities on this stuff, we should be able to figure out what a boundary does. So it's not perfect, but as someone who's written this stuff from scratch in the past, I can tell you that this is a huge time saver, that if it doesn't get you all the way there, it gets you more than halfway there, which is a great thing. So definitely use that report, which you again was, where's my browser? I think I just closed my browser. That's terrible. I'm going to new browser now to get back there. I have to stop sharing my screen to do so. I can't seem to get away from share to find my taskbar to open my browser. That'll get me there. Okay, give me a moment. I'm going to stop sharing, which lets me get to my taskbar, which lets me open my browser, which lets me reopen the application. I have to log in again. Sorry. Almost there. Okay, now back to the meeting so I can share my screen with you again. And I hope you can all see my screen again now. Completely lost what I was talking about. The meets and bounds report. Closing that report, I accidentally closed my browser because it opened in a browser window. That's what happened. But again, very useful under reports in the review tab, meets and bounds. The rest of them are all pretty much statistical reporting, which is also useful, but I don't know anyone that's not going to want eventually to have text descriptions of the boundaries that they're creating. So definitely probably the most important report on the reports button. And I'm not going to close my browser this time, just close the tab. Map notes, I'm going to come back to later afterward as essentially an extra if anyone's willing to stay for it, because I think it's more important to show you guys how to share your plans. At least with your own working task force groups, you're going to want to share plans with each other. And possibly you'll want to share them more broadly than that as well, if you want to share them to everyone who has a login. But in order to do that, you need to know how sharing works. And sharing is based on the idea of groups, of share groups. And the way they work is you create a group and then you invite other users to join that group. And then you can choose to share a plan to a group that you're a member of. You can't share a plan specifically with a user. I can't say, hey, you, here's my plan. If that's what you wanted to do and have a plan sharing of just the two of you, you would have to create a group, invite just that one person to it, they would accept the invitation, and then you're in a group together, and then you can share plans to that group of just the two of you. So what we're going to probably do, what we are definitely going to do at some point, is set up a share group for each ward task force that is exclusive to just that task force's members and the council staff representatives for that task force. And this will be the mechanism both for you to be able to share plans with each other within the task force, and also to submit that plan to that council member for their, to be honest, I don't know what the process is, if it's a review or just discussion or whatnot. But essentially we'll have to have a share group that is made up of the task force members and the council staff members for that ward. And so in manage groups here, on the manage groups button, what you can do is create a group, you give it a name and a description. So it'd be like, my task force group. I'm not going to worry too much about. Once I've created it, and there it is, I can then choose to invite people to it with this manage users button. When you manage users, you get a dialog where you can search for other people. And by other people, it means that people who have made a user account for this software, which hopefully all task force members who want to do this will have done. And you can search for them either on the username that they have made for themselves or on the name themselves that they've entered when they created their account. So if I search on the word Dennis, I find anyone who has either got the word Dennis in their username or has used the name Dennis in their login name or user personal name. And it's a fuzzy search, so really, I just wanted to go like that. I can find anyone with DEN in there. So it's this is how you find people. Once you find a person you want to invite to a group, you pick their name and you say send invitation. And you'll get one more confirmation, make sure you really mean it. And if you say okay, what that does is it then sends a notification to that other user, both when they're logged in and also to the email that they registered with, saying you've been invited to join this group. So-and-so has invited you to join their group. They're not added to the group until they accept that invitation. You can't force someone into your group. You can just invite them to join it. And so you'll see at the top of the application in this orange bar, there's some shortcut stuff about my name and what my plan is currently. And there's also an invites, and there's a 1 next to it that tells me that I have a pending invitation that I have not yet decided upon. This will open up at the exact same dialog that the group invites button does. It's a way for you to look at invitations that you've been sent that you haven't yet actually accepted or denied. So you'll see a list here with the group name that you've been invited to, and when you select it, you'll see details about it. You'll see who created it, who else is in it, whatever the description is for it, and you can choose to decline or accept the invitation. If you hit accept, you're now a member of the group. Any plans you'd like to share to that group, you can. Any plans that have been shared to that group, you can find in the open dialog. If you hit decline, the invitation goes away. You're not a member of the group, and you won't be able to join the group later unless someone sends you another invitation. So to show you how that works, back at the File tab, when you hit Open, remember I told you there's this dialog with the folders on the side. Shared Plans is the place where you can see all of the different groups that you've either created yourself or someone else has created and invited you to, and you've accepted their invitation. If that's the case, those groups will be in this list, and any plans that have been saved in to those groups will be visible when you click on the groups. There's also always a default folder called Everyone, which is the group of everyone. So the way you share a plan after a group either has been created or you've joined one is you hit Share Plan. And I think I have just opened a template here, so I can't share a template. You have to be the owner of a plan to share it. So let me just open a plan that I'm the actual owner of. Go back to that Share tab and say Share Plan. And you'll get a dialog that shows a list of all the different groups that you're a member of. And you can check whichever ones that you'd like to share this plan to. It doesn't have to be one at a time. You can share to multiple groups at once. And then there's also the checkbox separate from them so that you don't miss it that says everyone. And if you check that box, this plan becomes public and visible in that everyone folder. You can also choose how to share it, whether just to give read access only, meaning people can look at it but not make changes to it, or you can share it with read-write privileges, meaning other people can open it, other people that you've shared it with can open it and make changes to it and save those changes. So you choose the groups you want to share with, choose how you want to share it, and then say okay. And once that happens, any member of those groups you've chosen will be able to see it in their share folder on the open dialog. And it'll be listed there in that folder. Like you just saw, what I did, only the owner of a plan can share a plan. So if someone shares a plan with you and you open it, you can't then share it to a different group. It's not yours. You could save as to make your own copy and then share that one as you wished. But any plan a plan can only be shared by the person who created it to the groups that they're a member of. And again, we're going to make a share group for each task force, but you're free to have whatever number of groups outside of that for your own uses. You know, if you have, like I did just there, I have 2 different user accounts. If I wanted to share them between my different user accounts, not that I don't know why you'd need one, but you could make a group that's just your user accounts and share them and invite the different accounts and share them that way. Essentially, whatever sharing you need to do, you do it by creating a group, inviting people to the group, and then sharing it to that group. Are there any questions about that? I know that sounded fairly convoluted. Anyone? No? Okay, then I'm just going to show you this last button here. Edit profile is very basic. It's just a place where after you've created a user account, you can go back and change the name you've put in there and the email address you've associated with it, and also change your password. So if when you made it your account, you weren't being serious and you had a silly name, and now you realize your task force members want to find you, you can put your real name in here. Or conversely, you'd rather not have your real name in there. You didn't realize other people would be able to search for it. You can come back here and then change this to something less obvious or more obscure if that's your choice. So edit profiles where you can make those changes. You can't change the username itself. So if you don't like the username, you'd have to essentially make a new account altogether to change that part. And then the last thing about sharing I wanted to talk about was the thing I told you at the beginning we'd come back to, and that was to make a map of your plan. To share a map of your plan, you hit the print button, and what it'll do is it'll bring up a dialog showing you a layout of a map that you can configure. And then once you hit print, it'll ask you to save a PDF of it. So you can change the page size, change the page orientation, change how much of the page it's filled in with, how big the borders are, add things like north arrows and legends. Looks like I opened a word plan, didn't I? Not an SMD plan. What else can I do here? I can go to map properties and change things like whether or not the base map is shown in the background. Where is that? Display base map. How to just show the districts, with that outline or a fill pattern. Essentially a lot of customization about the map. Add a title. Annotation is text, so you can click this button and you can add text to the map. So, if this was a task force, say, and you can click and drag it around the page. There's just, all that kind of layout stuff you can do in here with these dialogues. Then when you hit print, it'll give you a PDF that you can then save or open with whatever your PDF viewer is. And then this is something you can share outside of the application for people who don't have a login or that you haven't shared the plan with in a share group. In addition to that, there's a thing called Plan Book, which is exactly the same thing as the first thing I did, except that you get a map of the whole plan, and you also get a separate page for each district. In this plan that I opened, their wards, but in your instance, there'll be a separate page for each SMD, which you can then configure again. And unfortunately, you can't set a configuration and have it apply to all the pages. You do have to go to each page and make those changes for each one, which when we're talking about 40 pages can add up to a lot, unfortunately. But it can be handy to have, a single map page for each of the SMDs as well as the overall plan showing all of them at once. So that is the plan book option to get at that choice. Any questions about that? I know I'm out of time here. No questions. Okay, well, I think that is going to be it, unless we want to practice the sharing stuff, which is a little difficult to do because I don't know who you know. I don't know who you'd want to invite to a group. So I find it's might be a little awkward to tell you to go make a group and invite someone to it, because how do you know they even have an account yet, or who are you going to share plans with? But I would like you to at least kind of click through those dialogues and look at them and understand how you do make a group, how you do review your invitations, and then once you're a member of a group, where you go to find the plans that have been shared to it on the open dialogue, because that stuff is how you're all going to be able to work together.
I had a broader question. I don't know if you want to wait for a second. So let's say we wanted to go from start with the ANCs and not the single member districts. How would you recommend the best way would be to do that in the software?
Yep. So this did come up the last time I did this, and it's something I should have thought to incorporate here. Let me open a template up here. I log in. Why it's not showing me my templates, but all right, I'm just going to open any old template because it's faster that way. So there's really no way to get at ANCs as a separate entity than SMDs, but a kludgy way you can kind of work through that is to create a new SMD by default, because that's all we can do here is create SMDs. So I say I'm going to make one more, and then I go to here, and at least temporarily I can just say, hey, it's the new ANC. So it's ANC 3, I don't even know. Okay. And it isn't really, it's still really just an SMD, sort of. Oh, I forgot I have to give it a name. Did I do that? I didn't give it both names. I'm not following my own instructions. And then so, treat it just like you would treat how you did the SMDs, but you're really creating the ANC, and just say, this here area, this is going to be that ANC. And then after I've done that, then I can go in and start making even more SMDs. That'll be the pieces that I break it into. And then once I've broken it all up and there's nothing left in that thing that I've created called ANC3K, then I can go back and remove it from the list. So essentially you're going to create an ANC that's really just an SMD by another name temporarily until you've assigned all of its pieces to yet another SMD, and then you can get rid of it at the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very helpful.
I realize it's not ideal. It's just the best we can do with the fact that we're really working with two different entities at the same time here, which the application developers never really envisioned. Any other questions? And question about anything at all? Because we're kind of at the end here. So if there's anything at all that I went over that you have a question about, I can answer it now.
I have a very specific question, and I don't know if it's a glitch or just a setting I did wrong.
Okay.
But on the map I've been experimenting with, there's an ANC, sorry, there's SMD, which is 6A06, that for whatever reason it's like it's always on the map, even if I add its territory to something else.
So I think I do know what that is. I've seen it myself. It happens when you accidentally zoom out to the block group or the tract level, and then made assignments. And what it did is it assigned a broader thing. It assigned a census tract or a census block group to something. And then when you're back in the blocks level, it's showing you the blocks, but it also remembers that the tract got assigned. And so it's confused about which level you're working in. So I think and I'm sorry, I can't see your screen to know for sure, but I believe if you zoom out to that broader level, to the block group level, and then move that assignment to the ANC you'd like it to go to, or the SMD you'd like it to go to, and then zoom back down to the block level, that might fix it. Or not fix it, but undo it.
It's still, it's like really weird where it almost seems like it's one SMD layered on top of another.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that that is what's going on. I guess I'm just not sure about what can undo it once that's happened. But what's happening is, if you know, here I am at the block level, right? And if I zoom out to the tract level and I say add to 6A07. See, let me undo that. 6A07. Yep. And then I zoom in to the blocks level, it won't necessarily always give me my assignments because it's remembering that that whole entire census tract got assigned. Now it's not going to do that, but I think I successfully messed up 6A07 just now by doing that. It got confused about tracts versus block groups, and now it can't get itself to the correct level to let you edit them out again. And unfortunately, I think if it's beyond the undo stage, it's just going to take some experimentation of reassigning to get it out.
All right, I'll tinker with
one
it.
of the things
Thanks.
I do is I do a blanket. Sometimes I just do a blanket grab. Like I'll just drag a big box like that to kind of get everything in an area into one piece and then back it out little by little to where I really want it. Kind of like erase the template in a way if it got too confused. Because yeah, it's software and it does glitch out that way sometimes.
Thanks.
Sure. Anyone else?
Dennis, this is Ken. I'm having a slight problem going back and pulling up the templates.
Sure. So they should be available when you're in the file and on the open dialog. They should always be available when you go to shared plans and then everyone. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of other stuff in there as well. But currently, right now, before a lot of ANC and SMD redistricting has happened, my template plans are probably the most recently shared with everyone files. So if you go to the open dialog and go to the everyone share folder and then click last modified twice, it'll sort newest down and you should see that some of the templates in there. Now you're going to see other people's plans as well. So you can find it that way. An easier way is to just log off and log on again, because every time you log in, it's going to put that template list in front of you. That's the first thing. So yeah, either if you don't want to log out, go to the shared everyone and look for it, or just log off and log on again, and it'll force the template list in front of you, and you can open it from there. Which is helpful, but also it's kind of useful. It's a hindrance because usually you want to open your own plan and not the template. But anyway.
How do you delete a plan?
It's in that open dialog counterintuitively. A plan that you have created, obviously you can't delete a plan that someone else has created. When you go to the My Plans folder in the open dialog, you highlight the name of it, click it just once, because I believe if you click it twice, it'll open it. Click it just once, and at the top, there's a red X. It says delete plan, and you'll be able to delete it there.
Okay.
You won't be able to do that to a plan anyone else has created.
Right. Okay. Well, this may not be up your alley, but there's no set number of ANCs per ward, right?
So your goal is to come out with a near 2,000 per SMD. So based on your ward's population, you're going to need to create more probably to get there. But no, there's no rule about how many there's supposed to be.
Or how big each one has to be.
Yeah, well, not how big it has to be in size, but in population size, yes, there is. And again, these are the 2,000. These are the existing SMDs, which.
No, I'm sorry, I'm asking about ANCs. There's no set size of an ANC.
No, well, I guess I'm.
That's correct. That's correct.
I know they
That's
vary,
correct,
but
Dennis. There is no set size for the SMD in terms of population.
Okay.
For the ANC.
For the ANC, there is no set size, no set population size.
And no set number of ANCs per ward.
No, there is not.
Okay.
Yeah, I do know that they all vary, that, there are some ANCs that are made of just 4 SMDs, and there are some that are as many as 10, but I
Mhm.
have no idea the rhyme or reason or any bounding rules upon that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess we're covered it. Yep. So again, I've recorded this, and we're going to post either this one or last week's one, whichever one seems to be more concise and useful to people. And that'll be on the OP's YouTube channel, which we will share in the chat as soon as we've finished recording here. I will type that URL in the chat for you guys.
And thank you, and thanks, Barbara. We've done a map that you can zoom in even further and see all those census blocks, so I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Okay, recording is now stopping.